I was thinking another thing you could say, which especially on cheese, because this sometimes clicks with people, is, do you know who eats the highest percentage of saturated fats anywhere in the world?
The French.
The French.
Yeah.
The French, with all those beautiful cheeses, and what are they have the lowest rates of heart disease in all of Europe. One of the lowest rates of heart disease in Europe. So I mean, things like that get people thinking.
I mentioned that in my book, actually, about the French.
How is that possible? What?
I mentioned that in my book a couple of times about the French. I said, we have so much to learn from them because of what you just said, the statistics, regarding their intake of fat and heart disease. And I have a couple of books on it back here, and talking about the French and the French diet. And I think we have a lot to learn from other countries like that.
At least it gets them thinking, those kinds of contradictions, because if you look at all the countries in Europe, if you plot saturated fat consumption and heart disease, it's like that saturated fat consumption here, heart disease going down, right? And then you look at the recent PURE study, which is the largest ever epidemiological study ever undertaken in how many countries around? I think 18 countries around the world, where it was fairly rigorous questionnaires. And of course, I never use epidemiology to try to prove causation, but I think when there's a contradiction, it is something worth noting. And the contradiction that they found in the PURE study, which came out last year, recently, the first truly global observational study, they found out that the more saturated fat people ate, the more likely they were to be healthy. But it was the contradictory fact that sticks with you is the lowest amount of saturated fat was the highest rates of, those people had the highest rates of stroke. So you have to really think about something like that, because that contradicts our dietary guidelines.
I want to interview that Dr. Yusuf, or is it Salem? Salem Yusuf. I want to interview him. Do you think he'll agree to it?
No, he should. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk about his data. I mean, that's a really important and groundbreaking study, because all the data that's been used to that is used to condemn saturated fats now, it's this weak associational data, and almost all of it comes out of databases that are overseen at Harvard, where they're really the leader of the School of Public Health there is a vegan. He's headlining vegan conferences. He really does not believe in animal food. So there's a whole kind of activist ideology that's going on at Harvard, but their science is some of the most, if not the most influential science in determining what our dietary guidelines are, and in this crucial issue of saturated fats. So like every 6 months they publish another paper saying saturated fats cause heart disease, saturated fats cause heart disease. You have to replace them with polyunsaturated vegetable oils. So, to take a natural cheese and somehow take out the natural fat and put in polyunsaturated vegetable oils instead, or low-fat cheese, which tastes terrible. And I mean, it's the idea that would be better than natural, naturally made cheese is a kind of craziness.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This is not on my list of questions, but I have to ask. So when you went to College Station to talk to Texas A&M University, the agricultural school, how were you treated?
Really, really well. It was, there were, I don't know, I didn't expect anything else, but it was Dr. Stovers, who's the head of the ag department there now. It's called the Ag Life Department. And it was his
Berkeley, right?
What?
Didn't he used to be at Berkeley?
No, he used to be at Cornell.
Oh, Cornell, okay.
And it was his first day on the job. And somebody had organized this keynote speech that I was able to give in a beautiful space to all their nutrition people, and it was great. I mean, it's a wonderful audience to be able to speak to. That's the biggest university in the country, I think, and they're an interesting university. They're the ones who the whole Green Revolution, the Nobel Prize that was won by that researcher who came up with the idea for the Green Revolution. I mean, Texas A&M has really been an important research institution in agriculture, and is an important alternative pole of expertise to the kinds of East Coast institutions which have really dominated the debate on nutrition. In fact, there's a really interesting little story about Texas, Theodore Reiser, who is a famous, beloved professor of nutrition at Texas A&M, and he was one of in the early I want to say the 70s, he penned a very important critique of Ansel Keys, who is the researcher who had come up with this idea that saturated fats are bad for health. Theodore Reiser penned a careful, thoughtful critique of Ansel Keys, and for that, he was, this shows you what the dynamics of the field have been and how powerful Ansel Keys was, why we've lived with this hypothesis for so long, because Keys was such a domineering figure and frankly a bully. He responded to Dr. Reiser's critique of his work by like a 28-page rebuttal, not like a letter to the editor, which is what you're really allowed, but somehow they allowed him 28 pages of rebuttal in which he literally called Dr. Reiser names and accused him of having all these financial conflicts of interest and accused his intelligence, said your facts are like, it's like watching in a fun hall of mirrors. I mean, it was so below the belt and so below what one would imagine for a professional discourse. It really reveals, number one, the long time history of bullying in this field that is shocking to anybody who expects science to behave better than that. And number two, really the personality of Ansel Keys and why he was able to defend his hypothesis for so long, because who would line up after that treatment and do what Theodore Reiser did, right?
I read that in your book, and it really made me mad because it's so, like you said, it was unprofessional. It's ridiculous.
He was mean and bullying, worse than unprofessional.
Right. Well, I'm a Texas A&M graduate, and I was born and raised in College Station, so I've been around, the agricultural school for many years. And when I found out that you were going to speak there, and I couldn't go because I was coming back from a trip, I was so excited for you, though, because I knew that you A&M students were going to be very receive your message in open arms, and I was really hoping that they would treat you well, and I'm glad they did. In fact, I talked to the marketing guy, and he said that your speech was the best they've had in years.
Well, that's great. Yeah. It was very well attended, so that made me happy, and good. Yeah, it was nice.
I have a couple of relatives that got mad at me for not telling them about it. Well, I just found out about it. Okay, so all right, let's see. This is we're almost finished. Let's see, your discussion was, okay, we talked about that. So when I was at the conference in New York City last February, I was at a conference and I ran into one of your friends, and do you want to know who it was?
Sure.
Okay. Well, it was Dr. Perlmutter. He was there speaking at the conference, and I had a very brief conversation with him, and I don't know how this came up, but your name came up, and he was effusive about how much he admired your work and your efforts that you're making. And I have to say that he's just among millions of us, Nina. I'm serious. We are so thankful for your work and the time that you spend doing what you're doing and trying to get the word out. And certainly the cheese people are happy about it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I would say, it really takes a village. It takes a village. Everybody on every street corner, in every supermarket, on every podcast, it really is taking, I think I recognize that there's this top-down policy that needs to change because it creates so many rigidities on the advice that we get about what to eat. But I think that what is beautiful about what is happening and has been really in the last few years especially is the bottom-up movement that you see just sprouting everywhere you go and just growing by leaps and bounds. So it's wonderful to see. I mean, and it's unstoppable. That's like one of the political dynamics that I see now in the food and nutrition movement is that really the main tactic that's being used to try to suppress the kind of science that we're trying to speak out about are just simply like straightforward tactics of suppression, right? Not allowing people to speak, I was disinvited from a conference, trying to get a film censored. There's a film called The Magic Pill that is a really wonderful film now available on Netflix. So the Australian Medical Association is trying to get Netflix to yank the film. But an effort to censor people, get their medical licenses taken away, get their nursing or their dietitian license taken away. I mean, there's an effort to try to silence the science by strangling the voices that are talking about the science. And that is disheartening, but it shows a kind of desperation of tactics. But I think it also shows that, I mean, those are really scraping the bottom of the barrel tactics, because the evidence on the side of, on our side, I mean, a scientific experiment where 60% of the population of diabetics reverse their diabetes in 1 year, right? With a low.
Okay, Dr. Sarah Hallberg, please talk a little bit about this. It's very important.
It is important. So, and actually this story really encapsulates what I'm talking about in terms of the politics. So it's a study of a little more than 250 type 2 diabetics, people with type 2 diabetes who have been living with this condition for an average of 8 years. So these are not easy cases to solve. And it was a university-based study at Indiana University, and they put this half of the population on a very low carbohydrate diet with a handheld device, like an app on your phone where you could type in, your weight would come up every day, and you get on a scale, it sends in your weight, and you type in your numbers. And so you have real-time conversation with your doctor, and that helps you manage your condition in a way that is very helpful. After 1 year of this intervention, 60% of the population had reversed their diabetes, meaning that their average daily blood glucose levels had dropped below the level that is considered a diagnosis for diabetes. So
Yay, Dr. Sarah Hallberg.
94% of them had gotten off all or some or all of their insulin.
Gosh.
And so this is incredible, because the field of medicine does not recognize that diabetes is reversible. They say once you get the condition, it is intractable, and it progressive, and it will lead to shortened life and death and all kinds of terrible condition. You lose your limbs, you lose your eyesight. It's just a terrible disease. And here was 60% reversal in 1 year. Imagine if the whole American population were put on this diet, from starting now, what we would look like, our economy and our lives would look like a year from now. Yeah. So we've been trying to get an op-ed, an opinion piece published by Sarah Hallberg on this study. First of all, the mainstream press, which will report any mouse study that shows that that a high protein diet might
study of 8
and put that on the front page. Not a single mainstream publication picked up those study results. University-based, medium-sized, controlled clinical study. Not a single news report. And Sarah Hallberg, when I was helping her write an op-ed on this and try to get it placed. We went through maybe 70 publications who rejected it, including, I've never seen this, and I've published quite a number of op-eds now, editors writing angry, hostile notes to us saying, how dare you?
No.
How dare you reverse diabetes? I mean, it's just, so the level of hostility towards this approach is high. The long time bias is intense. There's now a rash of articles that have been conceptualized in some PR shop somewhere. Now, all about the ketogenic diet and how dangerous it is, and it doesn't work in the long term, and you have to be careful of it, and spreading all these myths that used to be the critiques of this diet when it was known more popularly as the Atkins diet in the early 1970s, throughout the 70s. But now all those early concerns about the diet have been, the diet now has been tested in more than 70 randomized controlled clinical trials on some like 7,000 people, many different kinds of populations, including long-term experiments of 2 years, which would turn up any negative side effects, and there are none. So now
I'm getting mad. I'm really getting mad.
all these studies that come out on the keto diet, as it's now called, or they go back to the same critiques as if this science had never happened. They don't even recognize it. They don't cite it, but they go back to the same critiques that were made in the 70s, as if 40, 50 years of science had not just happened.
Oh my gosh.
So it's an astonishing, it's quite an astonishing field to confront, because it is so dominated by money-fueled PR trains that are really dealing in the realm of alt facts. It is not real science, and the real scientists won't stand up for the science themselves, because they themselves, like as at Harvard, either they're completely convinced by the vegan or vegetarian diet, or their careers have been devoted to proselytizing and promoting a high carbohydrate diet for health, and so they can't countenance another approach without without undermining their professional careers. So just to finish this whole thought, where I started was actually from a sense of optimism about change, because although this alt fact movement is strong, the strength of the science behind this approach is incredibly strong, and the power of individuals who regain their health, lose 100 pounds, reverse your diabetes, all your neighbors notice, everybody, you cannot help, but this movement cannot help but spread. That is not happening on any other diet. So I think the bottom-up movement will continue to just grow in strength, and it can't be stopped.
Well, when I go to the American Cheese Society conference in July in Pittsburgh, I am going to definitely tell them about this interview, and I'll probably just carry your book around with me. And I'm just going to say, look, there's still hope, and Nina is optimistic, maybe cautiously, but she's optimistic. So I'm happy to hear that, and I think you're making great strides, especially through the Nutrition Coalition. I would actually like to be more of a participant in promoting that. We probably need to talk about how that happens, but I really believe in what you're doing, Nina, and I have to say, from a personal standpoint, your book and your information has changed my life.
I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you for telling me.
Yes.
And, for anybody, you or anyone who wants to be involved in the Nutrition Coalition, we're still a new and fledgling organization, but here are a few things you can do. You can go to our website, which I think you'll have listed, but is nutritioncoalition.us. Sign up for our newsletter, where you will get not the alt facts version of nutrition, but the real facts version of nutrition, and also opportunities for volunteering as they come up. We'll keep you abreast of what's going on in Washington, D.C. You can donate. We rely on donations from people because, as I said, we don't accept any industry money. We will soon have a petition up there where you can sign a petition and then sort of formally become a member. And right now we're supporting screenings of the Magic Pill film around the country.
You announced that in Austin.
Yeah, there's one in Austin. So there's a list of those screenings, or you could host one in your own hometown if it's something that you want to do. If the movie gets yanked from Netflix, that will become especially important.
Yes, I can see that. Yeah.
Okay, so those are all things you can do.
Okay, good. Well, I'll definitely explore those. And as you know, I like to promote things that I believe in. So it used to be stray cats. Now it's good nutrition. I mean, I'm just a promoter. That's what I do. So,
and cheese. You're great at promoting cheese.
I'm going to promote the American Cheese Society conference in July 25th through the 28th in Pittsburgh. And I will be there with my favorite book in hand, probably a few more tabs. Oh, by the way, audience, guess what? Look what I have. Dear Babs, my friend, eat cheese and be well. How about that?
That's great.